welcome to a chat about why I live in a Swedish house in Denmark. And you may have noticed that the door opened outwards. That's to push away all the snow. It's pretty gone here, and we've never actually used that particular feature because the snow just doesn't even go that far up. But this is a sign of the fact that it's a different climate in Sweden. I didn't own a house until I was 40. By then I'd been imagining what it would look like for years. When I was a child I lived in brick houses, and when I became an adult I lived in apartments that were in brick buildings. So you might wonder, why a wooden Swedish house in Denmark? Well, the obvious answer of course is why not? But if you're not Danish you may wonder, what's the big deal about a Swedish house or a wooden house? Well, in Denmark most houses are made of bricks. So it is a little unusual. As you can see in these clips, which are from my little village suburb, in some ways brick houses are more sensible here in Denmark because our weather is more damp than in the rest of Scandinavia. And damp wooden houses don't make for a practical combination, so we have to paint our house more often than in Sweden or Norway. So why do it then, you may ask? Well, one reason, it's really allergy friendly. And it's really cost efficient when it comes to heating. It's cheaper to heat up our house than a much smaller apartment that we lived in before. But of course that's not really the reason. I love the fact that it's sustainable and everything, but the real reason is something else entirely. The real reason is because of the woman who wrote, amongst many wonderful books, this particular book. Astrid Lindgren was definitely my favorite author when I was a child, and Pippi Longstocking was definitely my favorite heroine. It wasn't perhaps so realistic to build a house that looked like Pippi's house because it was yellow and pink. It was wonderful, of course, but it wasn't really possible. In the books, it's very cartoonish looking, and in the films, which I watched religiously when I was a child, it's pink and yellow. And this one, it's just basically yellow, but still not all that realistic. Then came along Emil fra Lønneberg, Emil from Lønneberg, this other brilliant child character in Astrid Lindgren's authorship. And he lived in a Swedish wooden house, red, that looks uncannily like this house. That gave rise to the idea of a Swedish house years later. At least the dream of a Swedish wooden house like Katholt was born back then. The other influence in my childhood was, I don't know if you can see that, Carl Larsson. He painted some beautiful paintings, and I was just completely taken with it when I was a child and when I was young. And you can see here from the first page, for instance, that was the kind of house that sort of just invaded my dreams when I was a child. And very few houses looked like that in Denmark. In fact, I think I was really old before I even saw one nowhere near to where I lived. And I didn't see them until years later when I was in Småland in Sweden. I remember seeing this picture. And I thought, wow, I would like windows like that. We all know that our early influences leave the biggest imprints on us. And in my case, it was definitely Sweden. Astrid Lindgren's books and Carl Larsson's drawings. And so later I traveled to Sweden with my family, and one of the places that we visited was Astrid Lindgren's world, where you can see some of the houses from her books. For instance, Pippi Longstocking's yellow house, and Emil from Lønneberg's red house. And the dream grew from there, I think. In Sweden, especially in Småland, I saw hundreds of the red wooden houses that I had loved so much as a child. So even though I unfortunately don't have the beautiful Swedish landscape and all their forests around me, I've built the house. Later still, we got a cat and named him Findus. His name is from another Swedish children's author that many children in Denmark have read, as have their parents. Here you can see that Findus and his owner Peterson live in a red house as well. Hi Findus. Many things, whether we're conscious of them or not, tell stories about us. I suspect my house partly tells a story of nostalgia, but also of my values, and likely of things I'm not aware of. Who knows why we feel more at home in one kind of building rather than another? Another question is, why do we limit ourselves to settling down into and settling for what we're used to, or what a country is used to? If it's not a question of money, and wooden houses aren't more expensive than ones made of brick, why then? And as opposed to when I was a child, there are actually companies, certainly here in Denmark now, which will actually allow you to build them. And these days, the phenomenon of tiny houses is gaining ground. Why not build a wooden tiny house which resembles your dream world, whether one from Swedish children's stories, or one resembling a hobbit home, or something else entirely?